Welcome, everybody. I'm Joyce Graff. I'm the district governor-elect for District 7910. And today we're going to talk about Interact, what we do for Interact and what Interact does for us in our clubs. So I have with me the two experts in our district about dealing with Interact. Mark Vidal. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Good morning. Mark is the district chairperson for Interact and the recent president of the Marlborough Club. And also Sharon Spaulding from Concord. Hi, Sharon.
Hey, Joyce. Hi, Mark.
Good morning.
So Sharon is the Interact coordinator for Concord. So I wanted to talk with you this morning about Interact. I think the first thing I'd like to ask you is, how does having an Interact club benefit the club?
We have numerous events throughout the year, as does all clubs. Some of them are fundraising, some of them are service projects. By complementing our efforts of the club with young leaders in the program and developing those young leaders, almost every project that we do, is a success. However, without them, I'm not real sure if it would be a success. I mean, we have some big numbers of students who volunteer, and it's just exciting. The other thing that's just really exciting too is that the kids invigorate some of our more senior members. So they kind of like, got to make the donuts. They've done this event for 20 years and they just kind of go through and then all of a sudden the kids come in there and they get a big pump of energy to try to do the very best they can as an example to our students. So I can't imagine having Rotary without Interact.
That sounds like fun. So tell me quickly, make the donuts.
That's an old reference. Remember the Dunkin' Donuts guy that just gets up every morning at 4 o'clock and gotta make the donuts. Right? Well, that's sometimes how we as Rotarians do it. We've done it for so long, we just get into this routine, and we assume that something we've done 20 years ago is going to be successful today, and oftentimes it's not, or at least not to the same degree. And the kids can let us know that.
I completely agree with Mark. The students add energy, excitement, interest. They ask great questions and they challenge us. When our students, the Interact students in the high school, did a benefit for Ukraine, they had done so much research on why Ukraine needed generators. So yes, it was a Rotary program warm up for winter, but they had gone the extra mile and taught us even more than was written about.
So how does the Interact benefit from the club? What is the connection between the club and the Interact?
I think the benefits are, I can't even name them all. There are so many benefits. First of all, some of our kids, at least the ones that volunteer for Interact, are very high achievers in school. So they were already doing like 5 clubs and taking 3 AP exams and these types of things. So they were very busy. And sometimes they just join Interact because they want to belong to another club, another successful club. And by joining Rotary, they get to see a picture beyond their own microcosm. They get to see the community through the eyes of our members, which are very diverse. So it gives them a whole different perspective on life, particularly around service, but on many other aspects as well.
I think that was very well explained, but they benefit, I think, because we support them as they elect their officers, as they choose what projects they're going to support, but we help them to research the charity, look at Charity Navigator, learn about how you organize a project. So we let them do it, but they come to us and we give them certain parameters and guidelines.
So it sounds like there's a tight relationship between the club and the Interact. Just how do you structure that relationship?
This is key, and unfortunately, what you thought, Joyce, about Interact during COVID is unfortunately true. I've already had, I think, 4 clubs tell me that they lost their Interact clubs during COVID. So as a district, we have to kind of start from scratch. And how do we build up new interact interest, but also how do we reinforce the interacts that are out there working right now? Because again, this is a relationship. These kids have a lot of different activities, and if we don't bring value to that experience and interact, they won't come out. They won't volunteer on a Saturday, all day Saturday for a service event. So what I'm letting presidents know, because one of the presidents, I'm going to go up and visit the club next week. She goes, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, so that's where some of the clubs are. They don't know how do I get into schools? Now, this is I hope I don't embarrass this club, but they have 5 high schools within their catchment area. 5 high schools, and that doesn't include the middle schools, because middle schools, you got to remember, Interact goes from 12 to 18. So it can also include middle school students. I said, when was the last time you had the superintendent of one of those schools speak at your program? And she says, I don't think they've ever been invited. I said, there you go. So I really believe that the first step is to develop a relationship with the senior management of that school system. The superintendent, and the superintendent won't come to invite the principal. And just bring them in as a guest. Just bring them in. Hey, what's happening in the schools? What's happening in your school district? And let them talk. And because, there's not a superintendent alive who doesn't like to talk about all the successes of their school district. So bring them in and develop that relationship. And then you sit down and you talk with them on the side about some of the other programs that you would like to start with that school. Now, we not only have RILA, which is another program that supports student development. We also have a reality club that we've been doing for, 30, 40 years, long time. And then we do scholarships. We offer an awful lot of scholarships through those high schools. So once the superintendent sees that the club is making, or just has an interest in developing these programs, then of course, that superintendent's going to support you when you talk about, hey, how do we start an Interact in your high school? And then rather than going in there and trying to find a teacher, it comes down from the top. The superintendent says, hey, Mr. Principal, why don't we have an Interact club in town? The Rotary really seems to be on the ball, and this would really help our students. And the principal goes, no, that's a great idea. Because of course they always agree with their superintendent, so they better say it's a good idea. And then all of a sudden there's a teacher who, the principal sends out an email who wants to head up an Interact club. And then that it's real important that club president then hooks up with that advisor, that new person, because that new person isn't going to know how to start up an Interact club. They volunteer. They may have a little bit of information, but it's really important to develop that partnership from the superintendent to the principal to that advisor, and that club, either the club president or the club liaison, whoever the chair is for that club, has to go out and offer all the resources that we have available at Rotary International and even at our district. We have a lot of resources for Interact clubs. So there's a lot of resources out there for them to build, but they don't even know how to get access to those resources. So we have to help them.
You mentioned that Marlborough's had a relationship with the school for 30 years or something, and yet it got significantly weakened during COVID. So almost all of us are sort of either starting or restarting our Interact programs. And as you say, start from the top. But what are the rules that we need to keep in mind from Rotary International? Must there be a sponsor who is a teacher in the school? What's the regulation around that?
First to say, I completely agree with Mark about having the relationship with the superintendent. The president of our club, Jean Goldsberry, has a wonderful relationship with the superintendent. But as far as developing an Interact club, I do think you do need, and that can be with the help of the superintendent, the help of the principal, to absolutely identify usually a staff member who will be somebody who will be the staff advisor. That person needs to be able to champion the club and be excited about the club.
Yeah, and I would to piggyback that, even though that advisor is the point person for the school, the liaison from the club has to be in constant contact with that person.
Definitely.
If they're starting off, I would almost say on a weekly basis, if they're starting off. And that can be via email. It doesn't have to be a Zoom or an in-person thing, but that person should feel like they have the support needed to be successful, right? I mean, they want that club to be a big club too. because that looks favorable on them, to their supervisor. So, it's all about partnerships, and it's all about giving. We have an enormous amount of resources, but the resources, even for my own club, there are so many folks that don't know about the resources that are available to them as far as trainings are concerned, and so forth. So it's important that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Rotary probably has reinvented the wheel 20 times, so and that's a good thing.
Right. So are those resources through the Learning Center, for example, on Rotary.org?
So some are located right off. If you go to even our district, right off the top, it has like youth services, and just go down, and it talks about Interact and Ryler and so forth. But at International, same thing is, if you go to the toolbar and go into services provided, one of them will say Interact, and you just click on that, and because it is a formal club. People are going to understand this isn't just a club in the school, but it's a I don't know how to put it, but I'll say a wholly owned subsidiary of Rotary. So this Interact Club is a part of that local club. Formally, legally. So there are certain things that once the advisor gets notified, they have to identify student leadership. Then they have to develop their own bylaws, which there are many, not many, but there's a half a dozen examples of Rotary bylaws for Interact clubs online that they can pretty much just cut and paste and change the name type of thing. And then they have to submit an application through this club president all the way to the district to kind of like check off and say, hey, welcome aboard. You're all set. But it's a formal process. I know I just did it for my Rotaract club. So I know it's not as easy, it takes a little bit of dotting I's and crossing T's to get the club formalized.
Right. And with Interact and also with Rotaract, the kids are flowing through their educational institution. And so every 3-4 years, it's a totally different group of kids. So how do you maintain that continuum?
Every September, they have actually a fair in Concord. They sort of introduce the clubs to the students. And I also want to go back, Mark, to what you talked about. I do think there needs to be constant communication between the Rotary advisor and the Interact advisor. And a lot of that is about ideas for projects and programs. And a lot of that can come from your members. For instance, also to support Ukraine, Steve Verrill, one of our members, has Verrill Farm. And we had the students plant sunflowers and sell them to support Ukraine. Rotary's project of Rise Against Hunger, that's something that our Interact Club has done. And in fact, to get through COVID, we did a Rise Against Hunger event online. We talked to the students a lot about how they're going to get new members. For us, we have Interact Club at one of the middle schools. Some of those students learn about Rotary and then will join the Interact. They put out flyers, they put it on Schoology, I believe is there. I think it's what they use, at least in the Carlisle Middle School, to alert parents and students about what's going on in the school.
Joyce, in my club, and if I told you how big it is, you wouldn't believe me. But
try me.
We had 100, and they have to pay $50 to join now. $50 to join. We had 155 members last year.
Wow.
Oh, goodness.
So, and the money that we use goes towards service projects throughout the year. Like we do, once a month, we do a soup kitchen that we have to make the meals, serve the meals, clean up after for 50 needy people in Marlborough. So, and that's completely done by the kids. I mean, I go in, I bop in there once in a while, but it's all, the kids make the food. I mean, they serve it. It's really an amazing thing to see. But like Rotary, we have a succession plan. So we have a president and a president-elect, and the president-elect has to be either a sophomore or a junior, so that we know we have them for a couple of years. Following when that junior becomes a senior, in September, they'll get another president-elect. They have VP, they have a treasurer, they have a secretary. So it's very much like our own clubs is the way that I set it up there. And it seems to be working good. That succession plan really works out well because they know what has worked in the past, and hopefully they can make it better in the future.
What if a student can't afford the 50?
Well, we have a whole bunch of scholarship opportunities.
Oh, great.
No one ever gets turned down because of
That's great.
$50.
That's great. That's a huge Interact Club, Mark.
Yeah, we'll
That's
try to build it
wonderful.
up the same in the other two schools too. It's just like a regular club. I think once they start having successes and people are talking about the different things that they're doing, other people want to join it.
People
So
want to be part of a success story. Yeah.
3 years ago, it was like 50 people, grown that much. And we also we're fortunate that our middle school is with our high school. So we allow that 155 is between 6th and 12th grade at
That's
our
great.
school, because they're in the same campus, so it's relatively easy. I'm actually thinking, I'm going to ask the officers this year, it's not a formal thing, but I'm thinking about having like a junior interact club for the middle school, and that way I can have officers of the junior interact club. But again, it's all student driven, so if the students don't like that idea, we won't do it. It's that simple. We have great, really strong leadership, student leadership.
Great, Mark. You're developing leaders too. Yeah.
I'm trying to.
So it sounds like in order to have a successful Interact Club, you have to have someone in the mother club who is passionate about this and willing to work a hand in glove with the Interact Club. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely.
And
without that, you're not likely to succeed.
one last thing I want to add is just that the clubs make sure that they're doing all the background checks with the Rotary members and so forth, following any guidelines that Rotary has and also that the school has. So I did want to throw that in.
Good, good. Mark, tell me about the Day of Service project that you put together.
Joyce, it was funny. We were going to do a cleanup, but the cleanup in Marlborough, I think maybe cleanup across the state was like a week earlier, before Day of Service, Earth Day or something like that. I can't remember, but everything was cleaned up by that time. But our conservation director, town conservation director, introduced me to this bittersweet vines. They're everywhere. And since I did this project, it's like I'm having horror movies, nightmares about this vines coming everywhere. But these vines in our park were strangling trees and killing trees. I mean, just outright, they get so, they grow so fast and so thick that they will pull down a healthy tree in about 5 to 10 years. So we basically had about, I don't know, the total number was around 50, maybe more than that. That day, it was Saturday, I told them that, if you get poison ivy, don't do it. But we spent, a good part of a day pulling all these vines off of trees and off the ground. And there was a pond that no one even knew existed. Not a huge pond, but like a frog pond type thing. And by the time we were done, all these trees were, you could see the trees, first of all. At first, all you saw was this green blanket of vines. But on the other side of the trees was this pond, and the kids wanted to keep going. I mean, they would have cleaned up Bittersweet for the whole state, I think, if I let them go, keep going.
That's
They were
great.
just so
What a
excited
great
about it.
project, and what a good learning experience.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing that next year, talking to Christy about doing it as a service project up at Ryla. Because Bittersweet's everywhere. My goodness, it's everywhere. Look in your backyard, those things, and that the vines will grow and they'll strangle trees even in your backyard.
So this is one of those invasive species that they talk about that came in from somewhere like kudzu in the South. So a project like that is physical, which is good for teenagers. And it's also a lesson in ecology and how an invasive species can change the terrain where we are.
One thing I also wanted to mention is Interact clubs working together. A few years ago, when Bob Anthony was in the Wellesley Club, we did something with, I think it was 5 Interact clubs, which is depression awareness and suicide prevention. And we did a peer-to-peer leadership seminar, and the students got so much out of it. In fact, the session was from, I believe, 2 to 4, and they kept talking for an hour afterward. These kind of things, when Interact clubs can come together,
Right.
almost could become maybe a district Interact event.
I guess years ago, our district used to have an Interact event, for lack of a better term, at the district conference.
Yes, we did. That'd be great.
What has been the most rewarding part for you of working with Interact?
I think and this is a lot of what Mark's talking about, but I like the sense of pride, Mark. And so often that students can feel good about themselves. So they're so good to each other as well. And so they gain friendships. They do these projects, and to Mark's point, feel good about that. And there's so much value in that. They're learning to give, they're learning to be kind. These are qualities that will help them throughout their entire life. And I'm so impressed, our future's in great hands. You see these amazing kids, their energy, their passion, their kindness. And of course, the advisors, Agatha Wozniak, the advisor of the Concord Carlisle High School Interact Club, she's just so committed. And it's just a privilege to work with her.
This year, our Rotary International president is focused on mental health. And I know there's been a lot about mental health amongst teenagers coming out of COVID. So you mentioned earlier, Sharon, a program that you did about mental health. What should we be thinking about in terms of mental health amongst the Interact groups?
Well, I think it's an important topic, and I know the president of our club, Jean Goldsberry, is going to be focused on that. So I'm sure she'll be looking to include Interact. How about you, Mark?
Every kid, not most kids, but every kid was affected by COVID. And unfortunately, I know our schools and most of the schools across the state, increased the number of school counselors and adjustment counselors and so forth to deal with the almost an epidemic. It's kind of strange. We talk about a pandemic, but almost an epidemic of mental illness with our students. And I would go out to say that probably 100% of our students have either increased depression or increased anxiety as a result of COVID. Now, many of them have just keep busy and kind of repress feelings they have and just stay busy, and they think it went away, but I'm not sure that it has gone away, and I'm hopeful that it has. But I think that if Interact can get more involved and just interact within clubs themselves, but I love what Sharon said about having some opportunity to talk to other Interact clubs about how their healthy habits, I guess, would probably be the thing to share amongst Interact clubs. Staying busy, eating well. I mean, it goes on and on and on about what students have to do to overcome some of this anxiety that they're living with today. I know, like when I'm depressed, and some people think I never get depressed, but when I get depressed, I go for a walk. I have ways of which I have learned over my long life to deal with anxiety and depression. Some of our students don't have those. So if we provide activities like that day cleaning up the vines, that helps. It's not the total answer, but it definitely helps. So
Constructive coping skills, yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So staying active and staying with the group, which they were not able to do during COVID, but having that social interaction and feelings of self-worth and the good feelings that we all get from doing service, all of that is helpful. Yeah.
Last year, there was a 7th grade parent who contacted me and thanked me about having Interact, because it was the first interaction that her daughter was participating with other students since COVID. She was basically just going to school, coming home, and just staying home by herself all the time. So there was this feeling of isolation, and the mother recognized it and kept encouraging her, but she had to find a place that fit her. And thank God it was Interact. And now I probably have her for the rest. Now she's an 8th grader this year. I'll have her for the next 5 years.
So there are so many different clubs now in schools. Why do you think Interact is important amongst all those options?
Well, I think Interact, we have NHS, which is a club at every high school, And I think, I'm almost certain that NHS, no, I'm positive, NHS, one of their pillars is service. So almost every National Honor Society requires community service as well. But besides NHS, none of the other clubs have the kids out in the community doing service. So I think that, as long as the club is staying active and providing service to their community and developing self-pride and self-esteem, I think it's going to be a great attraction to a lot of kids. And I admire some schools that have a community service requirement for graduation. I wish our school did as well. My club would probably be about 250. So kids really just don't have as many opportunities to go out and get involved in the community as we once did.
Concord, Carlisle does have a volunteer requirement, but a lot of these kids, they blow right through that, and they're still volunteering just because that's who they are.
When I can, and the vine, pulling up those crazy vines was one of those instances, I allow parents to participate.
Oh, that's great.
So it's creating even more of a community, because not what the parent says, wow, I get a chance to go out and hang out with my kid, even though maybe not directly there, but I'm going to go to the same event with them. And I think that's another success. Another way of building up your Interact Club is to get parents involved as much as you can.
What would you two say to clubs who are contemplating starting an Interact Club?
I would just say to be patient and to do your legwork. Even if it means that it's going to be 6 months to the next year to start. Because I think, again, you want to make sure you have the buy-in of the superintendent, the buy-in of the principal. Then you find the right advisor. And I think it's important to really have that foundation before you start. But I would also really encourage people to, Mark's the district chair, talk to Mark, have a conversation. People can certainly call me. And really just get as much information as they can. Continue to encourage them, because it is so great for kids. And I hope there becomes more middle school Rotary clubs out there when kids are really developing who they are.
But Joyce, like anything we do, I think it probably takes 3 years to get a Interact Club up and running and running smoothly. So you got to keep, I agree with Sharon 100%. Patience is a big part of this, right? So you may have a couple hurdles to jump over that first year. But if 5 kids come out on the first Interact Club, that's a huge success. Don't have extreme high expectations. I want 50 kids. I want 100 kids, because if we get 50 kids, we can do this service event or that service event. Don't have any of those expectations. Just go out there and have patience, develop relationships with the school personnel, start a club. And if there's 5 kids in the club, that's 5 kids you didn't have last year, and build on it from year to year. I know another simple little thing, we've always given shirts to our Interact kids. It gives them a sense of pride when they're out there doing service projects. I wouldn't suggest an Interact Club for every club. And you're absolutely right, Joyce, on that. The club really needs to sit down and understand the benefits of an Interact Club, and be willing to give the resources, human and maybe a little bit financial, to building up that club.
What's the relationship between your Interact program and RILA, or is there one?
Oh, it's a huge one at my school. Almost every kid that on RILA comes back wanting to be a leader. And it was so enthused. Honestly, I received a thank you card from one of the RILA kids just this morning. And if let me show it. Oh, no, never mind. They didn't even know how to address an envelope. They put my address up in the left-hand corner.
Okay.
They're used to email.
They had they get told at RILA to send a real card. And I received 3 of them, pretty good percentage. But they put their hearts and soul in that card. And you can see that this kid wants to be a greater contributor at their school after RILA. I don't want to say every kid that goes to RILA is an Interact, but it's probably, 50 to 75% of the kids join Interact, because they now understand it.
This has been great. Any last words from either of you that you want to say to the clubs who are listening to this?
Go for it.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll be here for questions. Go for it.
I'm humbled and honored to sit down with you this morning. Great way to start the week.
I am as well. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Thank you both. This has been wonderful, and I'm looking forward to hearing great things about more and more Interact clubs within the district. And I think it'll be a great idea to have an Interact event at the district conference. So we'll work on that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.